So we see this eclipse is coming tomorrow, actually May 20th at 4:36 p.m. This is in the Pacific time. It starts around 4:30 to 7, 8 o'clock or something like that, or 6 o'clock. But this is the moment that we have the eclipse. You see Jupiter, Moon, Jupiter less than 1 degree, Moon and Sun are 6 degrees of Taurus, then Ketu at 11. Venus is retrograde at 29. And then we have Mars in Leo at 16. Saturn retrograde at 29. So Saturn and Venus are both retrograde and in trine to each other. They're both in Earth signs. And then Mercury is in Aries, about to go into Taurus. Rahu is at 11 degrees as well. So we have this eclipse at 6 degrees Taurus. And let's say Jupiter's not far away, having just moved into Taurus. So Sun and Moon, and Ketu is at 11. Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Ketu, Venus is retrograde and at a wide orb, but still ruling nonetheless. So obviously very strong Taurus energy here. And the nakshatra that's really important is the nakshatra of Kritika, which is ruled by the sun. And the god is Agni, the god of fire, who is the deity who purifies and illuminates and eventually burns off impurities in the mind. It's actually the star is the Pleiades, which is a hatchery, pretty much, of young stars that have just been born from the Orion Nebula. Our sun spent some time in the Pleiades before it came and broke out. This is the speculation, at least, that our sun was born in the Orion Nebula and spent time in the Pleiades and then came here. So this is also probably a big reason why the Pleiades, or Kritika, is considered the first nakshatra in Vedic astrology of the stellar zodiac, of the nakshatra zodiac. And the god Agni, the deity here, is the most glorified ruler, the most glorified deity in the Rig Veda. So this quality of sacred fire is really important to the origin of life, the flame of consciousness, the flame of truth, to illuminate and show us the distinction between good and bad, right and wrong, and the path we must take. In addition, the word Kritika literally means cutter, and it's to cut and to cut the veils of illusion. And so the moon is exalted in this nakshatra. So one of the interesting things about this eclipse is, even though the sun is eclipsing the moon, which means that the moon is dark and you can't see it in the sky, actually the moon is exalted. So it has a lot more natural strength in Taurus, because Taurus is the fixed earth, and that supports the emotional mind, which is what the moon is all about. So this exalted moon on the solar eclipse brings a certain amount of hidden and unexpected power to this eclipse. Now the eclipses revolve around which node is eclipsed and which node is doing the eclipsing and which luminary is eclipsed. So solar eclipses have to do with power, because the sun is the power. What is the real power structure? The hidden, creative, mystical, cosmic power that's being activated very quickly at this time, and it's around Taurus, because this is where body, mind, and spirit are coming together. That's what the eclipse shows, is where the sun, the moon, and the earth, the sun is spirit, the moon is mind, and the body is the earth. They come together and concentrate at these important points. So it's the sun that's eclipsed, which is the power to activate and to initiate some kind of activity. And it's Ketu, the south node, that's eclipsing. And Ketu is about concentrating power and bringing about the expertise of the past, which often tends to negate the mistakes of the present. Meaning Ketu is very much about where we have a lot of expertise in something. So a Ketu eclipse is going to concentrate and focus energy around the sun or the moon, whichever one it's eclipsing. So at this point, it's going to concentrate our efforts and concentrate our power toward the most pure form of whatever it's influencing. So in this case, it's Taurus lessons, which are about money, social concerns, connection, values and value systems. This is why right now we're seeing this in the news as well, and in politics in the United States. For instance, the president came out in support of gay rights, which is very much a Venus thing. Venus rules sexuality, and Taurus is about values. So it's really about social values right now. There's a lot of things being made about values and value systems. Also, money and wealth. A lot of people put excessive value on money, and Taurus is about money as well, and wealth. And so we see things like the government's wealth. This is why there's so many issues now with austerity measures with the European markets and the European governments. In France, they just had an election very much based on economic reform and austerity measures to get our financial house in order and stop relying on all this fiat capital, money that doesn't exist, by these big multinational financiers who are wrecking world economies. And this, I've been talking about this since the end of last year, actually. I said this was going to happen when all these planets gathered in Taurus, and it's exactly what is happening. We even just saw, concurrent to the focus and the scrutiny and the realization that we need to be austere in our financial practices and get these things in order, this coexists with kind of crazy financial things such as the recent Facebook IPO, the Facebook initial public offering in the United States, where the stock was valued at over like $20 billion or $120 billion or something like that in the initial public offering. This very much has to do with things like Jupiter barely moving into Taurus, because you see Jupiter barely has entered Taurus. So Jupiter is about growth and expansion, and because he's not really established in Taurus yet, there can be a kind of misevaluation of our values and what's truly valuable, and an overinflated sense of hope and optimism that's not really grounded. He's not really grounded in Taurus yet, and there could be a big correction of this later on, as I've said in some recent columns. But like I said, one of the biggest things here is that the moon is very powerful in this eclipse. So as much as you see us taking action and the government figures, the sun is related to the government, leaders, kings like President Obama and French presidents and elections and elected officials, but also banks. What we just saw in the United States, another major, a couple weeks ago, the head of the JP Morgan Bank lost like $2 billion of their capital, which also related to Saturn retrograde going back into Virgo, because this is kind of revisiting a lot of these Saturn and Virgo themes. But we're seeing the need for us to really follow a humanistic path, and one that is aligned with connecting to common core values and feeling the will of the people. This is what the moon is about, because the moon is exalted here. So as much as we're seeing a lot of actions around these matters as it relates to government officials, underneath it all, the real promise comes from honoring the collective psyche. And that's what's really driving these agendas, and that's what's going to continue to hopefully unite us around bringing about a greater renaissance in values and our value systems. For instance, also at stake are things like our food supply, food sources. We've just seen recently news about Monsanto and their genetically modified corn and genetically modified rice, and all kinds of these foods are now coming to market, and we have to make a decision about these things. So there's enormous promise for the next 6 months around honoring common values, things that are actually valuable rather than things that are just like paper tigers, or things that are valuable just because of the potential to inflate some portfolio. There's all these social movements that have begun around the world and that are still ready to spring back into action, like the Occupy movement in the US. Europe is still mobilized around important changes. The people themselves, which is related to the moon, whereas the government is related to the sun, the people are related to the moon. You're seeing that they are the ones who are really driving the agenda. Just like in Europe, they're the ones that elected the official in France. I forgot his name now because he's very new, but socialist, which the Socialist Party in France is like the Democrats in the United States. And then we also see these measures in Germany, these austerity measures, and the Greeks voting against getting bailed out and letting the chips fall so that we clean up these financial messes. This is the nature of Ketu. We need to address it, fix it, and not just baby ourselves through these short stop gaps that's just delaying the inevitable. And this is really what we need to do. So the fact that Venus is the ruler and Venus is there, this is why we've seen themes such as sexual reorientations and things like, well, there's gay rights agendas and legislation in the United States, like in North Carolina, they voted against it, and then the president came out for it, for the concept of gay marriage. And we've also seen these social issues be very important in our dialogue now. And so this is an overview of a lot of the things we can expect with this eclipse moving forward for the next 6 months or so. I'll also say that I wouldn't be surprised if the Republican candidate picks a female running mate given this lineup, especially if he does it within the next few weeks or so, while the sun is in Taurus. So we'll see about that. But we also have a lunar eclipse coming up with the moon debilitated, so we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. Now I'll do a forecast for the gold members so everyone can see how this eclipse is going to affect them, not just for the next month, but for the next 6 months. So if you're not a gold member, if you're not a member of the site, you can get a free 2-week trial. Actually, it's for 1 penny. But just click the link below this video and you can hear about your sign and how this eclipse is going to affect your sign.